Friday, November 15th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning, I'm going to talk about how gold is a revealer of falsely stated wealth. Silver as well. And for that, I'm going to reference a very good book. It's called A Pocketbook of Gold, a survival manual for monetary mayhem by James E. Sinclair and Peter D. Carlin. So here's the book. Yes, it feels like a rent is necessary. We keep seeing the stock market being souped up, right? We keep seeing the debt being inflated. I think the world now has almost $250 trillion of debt. That's not counting all the derivatives in the world, which are probably over a quadrillion. That's not counting the missing 21 trillion. That's not counting the unfunded liabilities of the US, which are almost 130 trillion, right? And yet silver is still below its levels of 1980, and gold is at very suppressed levels as well. Not as much as silver, of course. I know from experience in the markets that precious metals are manipulated lower and the stock market is manipulated higher, right? Why has the Fed cut rates 3 times? Why they're doing QE again, which is not supposed to be called QE, right? Why are they helping the repo market with hundreds of billions total QE and the repo? Why are they doing that if the stock market is at all-time highs and the economy is doing so great? Well, because they need to convince the people out there, investors especially, and the general public, that they need to keep taking the crack cocaine, right, or the heroin. This is not me saying this. This was Dick Fisher, former president of the Dallas Fed. He said that on national television or CNBC or whatever, that basically that's what QE was for. It was to put heroin into the market, right? And just because it feels good, right, taking drugs, and because everyone is doing it, doesn't mean to say that we have to do it, right? And doesn't mean to say that by having precious metals, you're doing the wrong thing. In the long term, you need to have that. So let's have a look at this. A revealer of falsely stated wealth, right? This is on page, let's have a look, page 70. I really recommend this book if you can find it on in the internet. It's not easy to find. You need to Google it, maybe on Amazon or even eBay, right? So let's go through this section here. It says, gold is a revealer of falsely stated wealth. When wealth is overstated and expectations for future wealth are unrealistic, fiat currencies depreciate. The depreciation is borne by the citizenry, who are forced to lower their living standards to compensate for both personal economic management as well as the mismanagement of the affairs of state. Financial and military overextension has a social corollary in overpromised Social Security, Medicare, overstated real estate equities affluence. As expense runs out of control, well, think of the budget deficits. Think of the unfunded liabilities, right? 125 trillion or 126 trillion. It's going up so quickly, I'm losing track of it. As expenses run out of control, guarantees to the citizenry also explode as politicians seek to retain the privilege of office. Well, that's happening here in the UK. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party are promising the world to the taxpayer for this next election. Boris Johnson is saying the economy is going to be transformed. He's not looking at the debt, right? But the promises of wealth are false. The belief that ownership of real estate is a ticket to fortunes is hollowed out for what it is, a myth. Wealth that was taken for granted suddenly appears ephemeral. The amount of currency which once but certain things no longer does. But wages have not risen along with prices. Instead of wealth, citizens get saddled with a big chunk of government debt, i.e. debt created by mismanagement. And encouraged by the Federal Reserve as well, because they've been buying trillions of treasuries in the last few years, even though Powell recently gave a lesson to Congress saying that they should watch their spending, right? And he's encouraging it. He's helping them. The result is everyone pays for more for food, fuel, and other necessities. Government passes on the mismanagement of economic affairs to its citizens by devaluation through their fiat currency, right? As the imprisoned money manager Martin Armstrong has artfully stated, I will say Martin Armstrong was let out of jail, and I used to enjoy reading more his stuff when he was in jail than now, I have to say. But this is before he left jail. This is what he said. The decline in the value of a currency is in reality a free market tax taking away wealth that is overstated. So currency can also be an indirect tax to compensate for the poor management of the state. The corresponding rise in gold, especially when it is a global phenomenon as it is now, is in effect a devaluation of all the world's currencies and a restatement of wealth on a global scale. As in both presently and historically evident, the attempt to restate wealth to a lower level becomes a competitive event in its own right, as nations fight to devalue their currencies against each other to reduce the burden of indebtedness. It should be recalled that when FDR lowered the value of the dollar vis-a-vis gold in 1933, America was the 9th nation to do so in a 3-year period. So this is how it ends, this part here, about gold being a revealer of falsely stated wealth. Falsely started and assumed wealth, largely created out of the assumption of debts that can not be borne, must eventually reset at a lower level. Populations bear the restatement of wealth through the expansion of monetary aggregates, causing a devaluing of the national currency that dominates their wealth. This happens to all currency holders, regardless if they personally assume any debt. Gold rises because gold is a monetary proxy inversely related to a nation's currency. The burden of indebtedness is reduced along with the standard of living. Commodity prices increase. Debt deflation has become currency inflation. They are one. That's why they need to keep trying to keep the price of gold and silver suppressed, because if they don't, they can't keep the Ponzi scheme going, this paper asset bubble going as well. They need to trick people into thinking that everything is great, that is wealth that's been created, this paper wealth through the stock market is real, right? So let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 7:45 a.m. London time. We've had more news on the trade front, and this time coming from the White House. Investing.com is saying stocks cheered by trade deal hopes, but caution prevails, right? It says here, Asian stocks jumped on Friday, lifted by White House comments that suggested the possibility of an imminent trade deal between Washington and Beijing. So is that the real trade deal, or is that just phase one? You see, they're confusing people already with that phase one. Phase one is not the whole deal, right? So yeah, the stock market has been up. The futures yesterday was like a very quiet day. Nothing really moved. The Dow right now is up 92 points. The Dow futures, it has been up as much as 120. S&P is up 11 points. It's broken through 3100s at 3107, up just over 1/3%. And the NASDAQ 100 future is also up over 1/3% at 82.88. Gold and silver, of course, the revealers of falsely stated wealth, of course, are down. Gold is down $7 at 1464, and silver is down 15 cents at 1685. Range for gold has been 1471.80 to 1463. Silver 1705 to 1682. So the manipulation continues, and I would argue as well, gold and silver are inversely related to monetary rectitude. So they're like a barometer. The higher they go, the more people realize that the central bankers are not doing a great job. I think more and more people, though, are realizing that, and that's why I don't think they can keep this game of falsely created wealth or stated wealth for much longer. What about the other currencies, other fiat currencies that are going to sink just like the Federal Reserve note or the paper dollar? While sterling is unchanged this morning, 128.77. Euro as well, 110.18. And the dollar is a little strong against the yen, 108.54. And the dollar slightly lower against the yuan at just below 701. Crude oil up 0.33%. WTI 57.03. Same with Brent, just under $62. To finish off, let's look at the bond market. Yesterday, yields dropped about 5 basis points. The 10-year yield, I think we got down to around 181. Last week, we got up to almost 198. So yields have been dropping, which is weird with the stock market making new all-time highs. Of course, the Federal Reserve is helping in all this to keep interest rates low, right? Even though Jay Powell criticized Congress for spending too much and borrowing too much, right? He allows them to do that. This morning, though, the 10-year yield is slightly higher, up 3 basis points, just below 185. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you hit that little notification bell above to be notified of all my new videos. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.